Bitcoin is completely unstoppable, but we do need to start preparing for a world where sanctions regimes, where we block people from transacting within the United States financial system, those are not going to work the same way that they used to.
What are you hearing from the miners regarding quantum?
I think it's really important that we're having these conversations. What are we going to do? How are we going to move towards a world where Bitcoin is quantum resistant?
This episode is brought to you by iTrust Capital. iTrust Capital allows you to invest in crypto as well as precious metals like gold and silver via an IRA. And this gives you huge tax advantages. So you can invest in over 90 crypto assets, including Bitcoin, Ethereum, XRP, Solana, and many more. You also get access to stablecoins such as Circle's USDC and Ripple's RLUSD. And as it relates to precious metals, you can invest in gold and silver, and these are the physical assets. So you're not investing in paper gold and silver. So on this platform, you can redeem the gold and silver if you choose to, and not many platforms offer that. Now, the big advantage to investing via iTrust Capital's IRA is the huge tax advantages. Many of you know you incur capital gains taxes when you sell at a gain. Well, you can minimize the effect of some of that by doing it via an IRA, especially if you have a long-term view on crypto as well as precious metals. And you can buy and sell crypto and precious metals 24/7. It's low cost and no monthly fee. So this is a great option to get exposure to these two great asset classes. And in addition, they have a great custody solution. It's called Premium Custody Account. So it uses institutional grade crypto custody, such as Coinbase Prime, which BlackRock leverages. iTrust also uses Fidelity Digital Assets as well as Fireblocks, and it's a closed loop system. So if someone hacks into your account, they can't withdraw funds. I believe this is the second safest way to custody your assets, right behind self-custody, where you control the private keys. And within the custody account, you could buy and sell 24/7. It's low fees. So this is a great option for custody of your assets, and you can sleep at night knowing that you're getting the institutional grade custodial services. So once again, two great products here from iTrust Capital, the IRA, where you can roll over your existing 401k or IRA to iTrust Capital's version, getting the huge tax advantages, and the institutional custody. And folks, if you sign up with my link at itrustcapital.com/go/thinkingcrypto, you could get a $100 funding bonus. I have an account with iTrust Capital, so I encourage you to go check out iTrust Capital, learn about their services, and see if it's right for you. Again, you can get a $100 funding bonus by signing up via my link, which is itrustcapital.com/go/thinkingcrypto. Link will be in the description. Hey folks, welcome into the Thinking Crypto podcast. I'm your host, Tony Edward, and joining me is Dennis Porter, who is the co-founder and CEO of the Satoshi Action Fund, which is a Bitcoin and digital asset advocacy organization. Dennis, great to have you on.
Yeah, glad to be back on. It's been a little while. Excited to be on here, though, talking about my favorite topics, Bitcoin and policy.
Absolutely. And I mean, you were just coming off a call. There's a lot happening in DC. And yesterday we got a big announcement of a new Bitcoin Reserve bill that was introduced. And I figured I had to get you on. And we also are going to talk about Mind in America. So lots happening in the Bitcoin ecosystem and policy front. Let's start with the bill that was introduced yesterday. Tell us about this and who introduced it.
Yeah, the American Modernization Reserve Act is a bill that was recently introduced by Congressman Begich. Begich was originally the sponsor of the House companion for the Bitcoin Act, and so it's exciting to see them rebrand the Bitcoin Act and start this effort, over again in the House. Give it some new life. Of course, there's probably going to be changes within the legislative text that are different from the Bitcoin Act. The biggest thing, from what I'm hearing, is that they will be changing the custody, making sure they centralize the custody across the different branches of the government. But the big thing here is also the number of co-sponsors that they were able to acquire for this piece of legislation. Now, the vast majority of them are Republican. There was one Democrat, but it's still great progress to see. Happy to see that effort continuing to move forward. Happy to see someone be the torchbearer on the Bitcoin Reserve Act, and looking forward to seeing what kind of progress they can make in this Congress.
And to your point with the co-sponsors, a good amount, Dennis, about 16. I was actually pretty surprised by that. And in a world of, everyone focusing on the Clarity Act right now, it's great to see that this bill has a lot of support from the get-go.
Yeah, absolutely. And that number even jumped up. I believe it's somewhere around 21 co-sponsors now. Yeah, you oftentimes will see this at the last minute when you're right when you're about to make an introduction. You're putting out your requests to different offices saying, "Hey, you want to jump on this thing?" And when the clock is running out, oftentimes you'll have people jump on at the very last second. Like a good deadline really does help to push things forward. In fact, we're seeing that happen right now with the Clarity Act. There, we are running up against the clock. There is a deadline, and we have to start making progress on that legislation in order for it to be successful. And so we love a good deadline. We see them oftentimes in the state work that we do, because most states only meet for 3 or 4 months out of the year, maybe 5 months out of the year. And so when you run out of time, when you're at the end of the session, you got to really start moving. And so that really helps to grease the track, so to speak, of the policy process. Now, if your bill doesn't make it, it's dead. But we have found time and time again that a great deadline does tend to move these things forward. And fortunately, in Congress, there's a number of different deadlines that you can use to your advantage. Some of them being the current Congress we're in for something like the Clarity Act. I don't think it'll have a very good shot in the next Congress. So lawmakers are like, we got to have this markup. We got to get to the floor. And we got to iron out the differences between the House and the Senate version. And then we got to get this to President Trump's desk ASAP. And it looks like that deadline is working effectively for the Clarity Act. But there's other types of legislative vehicles, the NDAA, reconciliation, you name it, where there are these giant bill packages. Some of them are must-pass bills like the NDAA. And so having that deadline looming and approaching is really helpful if you're trying to get something fit within that bill.
Dennis, leading up to the introduction of this bill, we saw quite a few folks in the government, US government, talk very positively about Bitcoin and the need for us as the United States to secure it, and it's a national security issue. We had an admiral speaking in front of Congress, I believe Pete Hegseth, if I'm not mistaken, said some things as well. So it seems like the narrative is shifting here that we need to own crypto, we need to own Bitcoin.
Absolutely. I mean, you're seeing this all across the United States government, that more and more people are willing to put their name in the ring with regards to supporting the ownership and the holding of Bitcoin by the US federal government. This is incredibly important for the United States as a monetary tool, to have Bitcoin as a backup plan and have it as a tool as part of our monetary strategy. But also at the same time, more and more lawmakers are now also waking up to the idea of using Bitcoin for national defense, for national security. Jason Lowery's thesis has really taken hold in the minds of a number of lawmakers, including also Admiral Paparo, who is the head of INDOPACOM. INDOPACOM has oversight over roughly 60% of the world's population under their combatant command. They deal with 3 out of the 4 world's greatest threats, including North Korea and China. So the very fact that Admiral Paparo came before House Armed Services and Senate Armed Services to share his views and perspective on Bitcoin after being asked questions by Senator Tuberville and Representative Gooden is a huge milestone for us in the Bitcoin space, and actually, in a lot of ways, was incredibly helpful for us in our arguments and our conversations. I mean, you just cannot deny an admiral, a 4-star admiral, head of INDOPACOM, coming to the U.S. government for his posture testimony and saying very positive things about Bitcoin. In fact, that the military itself is running its own Bitcoin node. Lawmakers are not going to ignore that. They can't ignore that. And it's been hugely impactful for our work on the Capitol, where we're having these conversations with lawmakers, trying to tell them why they need to understand Bitcoin and learn about Bitcoin and start using their policy mechanisms and their policy capacity to pass legislation into law that will ultimately help the United States benefit from the technology.
And to that note, earlier this week, and this hasn't been fully confirmed, but there were talks and reports about Iran using Bitcoin insurance premiums or some sort of setup for the Strait of Hormuz. So it seems there is these catalysts now that are popping up around the globe that even further puts this in a priority seat that we need to get it figured out.
Absolutely. And this is going to happen more and more and more. Even recently, Marco Rubio came out, Secretary of State for the United States, and he said that the sanctions regimes of old might not work the way that they used to. Now, I don't know if he was thinking about Bitcoin specifically when he was making those comments, but it's clear that Bitcoin is a tool that will help folks all around the world be able to transact. And it doesn't matter if you're friendly to the United States or you're not friendly to the United States. It's the same thing as the internet, right? Like good people are going to use the internet, bad people are going to use the internet. Good people are going to use Bitcoin, bad people are going to use Bitcoin. There's nothing we can do to stop that. Bitcoin is completely unstoppable. But we do need to start preparing for a world where sanctions regimes, where we block people from transacting within the United States financial system, those are not going to work the same way that they used to. And the Strait of Hormuz dynamic that's going on right now, where Iran is charging boats for safe passage through the strait by charging in Bitcoin, that is just the tip of the iceberg. That is just the very beginning of how this technology is going to be used. And so it's prudent and key for our national security folks to understand this, understand they can't stop it, and start to rework their view of the world and how we are going to engage in the world from a financial perspective when these sanctions regimes no longer work.
Pardon the interruption. Hi, I'm Tony. I'm the host of the Thinking Crypto podcast. I wanted to ask you if you can please support the podcast by hitting the like button, subscribing if you haven't as yet. You can leave a comment below as well. And if you're listening on a podcast platform such as Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts, please be sure to follow and hit the 5-star rating. I'll let you get back to the content. Thank you so much. Now, we don't have all the details around this bill, the American Reserve Modernization Act, but I believe the ball is already rolling where they're going to pool the Bitcoin that's been confiscated and seized over the years via different federal agencies. But the other aspect is, how can they buy Bitcoin from a revenue neutral standpoint where it isn't a burden on the taxpayers? Do you have any ideas of what that might be? Is it repricing gold or something else?
Certainly, there's certainly been many ideas that have been thrown around. Repricing the gold is one of them. You know, if I had my magic wand and I could pick how the federal government would buy Bitcoin in a budget neutral way, I would tell them to do the same way that Arizona is doing it right now. I would tell them to do it the way that it was the language that was introduced in the Mind in America Act. The Mind in America Act was originally introduced as a piece of legislation for one to help onshore the manufacturing of Bitcoin mining hardware, but it also codified the strategic Bitcoin reserve, codified the digital asset stockpile, and importantly, it allowed for the digital asset stockpile to stake the assets within that. Because if you have a digital asset stockpile, you're going to have stakeable assets. You're going to have Ethereum. You're going to have Solana. You're going to have these proof of stake protocols within there, and those assets can be staked and they can be used to generate revenue to be able to buy Bitcoin for the strategic Bitcoin reserve. 100% budget neutral. This is already happening in the state of Arizona. It was introduced by Republicans, signed into law by a Democrat. So it's a very bipartisan issue. And I believe that this is the most obvious and easiest way for any government to be able to purchase Bitcoin in a budget neutral way without really moving anything around, without pissing anybody off, without raising any eyebrows. You start revaluing the gold or selling the gold. That's going to raise some eyebrows. Certainly, there's a lot of members of Congress who don't think we need gold anymore. So you'll find some people that probably would agree with that approach. But when you're talking about the art of the possible in politics, which you should always be thinking about when you're working on legislation, is what is the most, what is the idea that has the most teeth, that can get the most done, but that it can pass? And in my perspective, that's the vision and the mission that Satoshi Action has always been aligned with. That's why we've been able to pass more digital asset policy into law than any organization in the world. It's not close. We've codified language in over 11 states over 12 times. About to be our 13th time as soon as the governor of New Hampshire signs this 13th bill into law. So we've gotten very, very good at codifying language and making policy progress. I mean, we were the first organization in history to pass strategic Bitcoin reserve legislation into law. And there's a reason why, because the way that you go about it, the way that you craft the language, the ask that you make of lawmakers when you're working on this type of legislation always has to recognize what is the art of the possible? Where is the Overton window? And the Overton window is constantly shifting. And fortunately, so far over the past several years, it has shifted to our benefit. And more lawmakers than ever before see the value of having a strategic Bitcoin reserve. They see the value of helping the United States lead on digital assets and crypto. But I don't know if they're ready to buy 5% of the world's Bitcoin supply. And I don't know if there's enough of a budget neutral way to get us there. But we should absolutely be codifying the strategic Bitcoin reserve. We should absolutely be pursuing budget neutral pathways to purchase Bitcoin. And we should try to do it in a way that when everybody looks around the room, they're like, yeah, this just makes sense. Like, we should just do this. That's where Mind in America is at right now. There's nothing more bipartisan than being anti-China. And Mind in America is very much about onshoring the manufacturing of Bitcoin mining hardware so that we can pull it away from our foreign adversaries. China produces roughly 97 to up to 99% of Bitcoin mining hardware. There's currently an open investigation by the DHS called Operation Red Sunset, which when we spoke to the China Select Committee and we spoke to the other China hawks in Congress, said that there was very troubling findings within that report and that they have been monitoring this problem for a couple of years now. Even people that don't care about crypto at all have been monitoring this problem and they want to find a solution. So fortunately, Mind in America is a clear solution to be able to help to be able to help solve this problem. And we do feel that we don't have to do a whole lot of convincing to help folks understand why we need to make sure that China doesn't have a backdoor into our energy systems.
Absolutely. And obviously, kudos to you and the team at Satoshi Action Fund with all the great work you guys have done with the states. And it feels like the more progress we make with these states, that can move from the ground up to the federal level, and like to your point, setting these models and showing what works, and then that could be applied on the federal level. I did want to quickly ask before we double click into Mind in America, with regards to this Bitcoin Reserve bill. Do you think this is like a 2027 thing as far as passing?
I mean, you always want to be optimistic. Whenever you're working on policy, the idea is, shoot for the moon, and even if you miss, you'll land amongst the stars. You always have some sort of big, big policy win objective that you're trying to achieve, but you also need to realize that it might not work out the way that you planned, that it might take longer than you expected. So that way, the biggest problem in policy is sort of staying motivated because it can take years, sometimes over 10 years to pass policy. I think twice this last week, I was hearing members and staffers say that it took them a decade to get something across the finish line. So it's very important to be realistic about where you are from an internal perspective, so that you do not get over your skis. But also, you want to be optimistic that you could get it done. And so I would say the optimistic viewpoint is that we're able to get some parts of a reserve or codification of a reserve into law. But the idea of buying 5% of the world's Bitcoin supply this year, I think, is a little far beyond where we are at right now with members of Congress. But that doesn't mean that won't change before the end of the year, even, let alone next year.
Yeah, especially if there's a national security issue or situation going on, along the lines of what we talked about with China
Absolutely.
and Iran and much more. So if those things escalate, certainly that could light a fire under the seat of some of these folks and move it through.
Absolutely. That's 100% right. And this is something that I've said to many people that are working on the federal effort for a Bitcoin Reserve. I always say that this could change very quickly, and it would change very quickly because of a real world event. If something happens in the real world, a black swan event, or a golden swan event, as some people might call them, because they don't always need to be something really bad happening, but it tends to be that way. Congress tends to move and act and react to very negative and fear-based types of events that take place in the world. So it could be some sort of really good event or really bad event that happens that forces or really rapidly encourages a lot of lawmakers to be supportive of a strategic Bitcoin reserve. But we've got I don't know what 6 months left or less before November. And once November hits, there's not a whole lot that's going to happen. Policy just doesn't really move as you get close to elections, and especially doesn't really move after the election. So I would certainly tell people to have their expectation that this could take till next year, but always keep your eyes open as a policy person in the space. You always want to keep your mind and your eyes open for an opportunity to get it done much faster than you thought of before.
So let's talk a little bit more about Mind in America, because this is significant. So is the goal here to certify the miners in the United States, make sure they're following certain regulations, so to speak, and they are, we're fostering the growth of mining of Bitcoin in the United States, again, from a national security standpoint?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the Mind in America Act is set up in a way where if you are moving over to U.S. made or allied made hardware with the core intent of the legislation is to break the Chinese monopoly over our Bitcoin mining hardware. Obviously, we would want all of that built in the United States, but you could also be purchasing Bitcoin mining hardware that's coming from an allied nation as part of this program. And as a note, it's a voluntary program, so 100% voluntary, no new spending, no new appropriations, all using existing frameworks, only expanding eligibility. And when I say expanding eligibility, what I mean is as you move from Chinese-made hardware or foreign adversary hardware, as the bill titles it, over to U.S. or allied-made hardware, you are able to get access to different types of DOE programs. So let's take DOE Title 17's loan guarantee program as an example. The way that works is if you're doing emissions avoidance, if you're building out electrical infrastructure, if you're doing good things for our energy systems and our environmental systems, then you are able to qualify for a loan guarantee from the federal government. And what that means in practice is that you'll still go out to the free market to get a loan. You'll borrow money from the free market, but the federal government will backstop that loan. And that's great for the person that is getting the loan. And it's also great for the lender because it means that the rates are going to come down, way down for the person that is applying for that loan, getting them very close, if not right on top of the Fed fund rate. And one of the biggest problems for Bitcoin mining has been in the United States is unless you're a publicly traded company, you have a very hard time to access cheap capital to build out your Bitcoin mining data centers. And so what this is saying is to say, hey, we understand that you have a problem with cheap access to capital, but we have a problem with you having a bunch of Chinese hardware plugged into our grid. So if you get away from the Chinese hardware, you move to US made hardware, we will allow you to qualify for these different types of programs. Now, it doesn't mean you're going to get the money automatically. You still have to compete, but it does put Bitcoin mining into that pipeline of being recognized as a piece of energy infrastructure and a tool that is powerful enough to be able to balance our grids, to be able to mitigate methane emissions, and to be able to advance wind and solar power and other types of electrical energy infrastructure.
And then, as I can imagine, the U.S. government, if they're looking to buy Bitcoin, they're going to want to buy from certified Bitcoin miners, and this aligns perfectly with the end goal of accumulating Bitcoin. So you're not going to go buy Bitcoin from miners in China necessarily or other countries. You're going to want it homegrown.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the original version of Mined in America, the one that was introduced, Senate Bill 4251, was within that bill, there was a recognition of Bitcoin that could be purchased from certified miners. And there was even the ability for Treasury to offer a tax break to the Bitcoin miners that they purchased the Bitcoin from that are within that certified pool. Really, what it was is it was giving Treasury a tool to negotiate a better deal on the purchase of that Bitcoin. And the money that they would be using to buy it would be coming from the digital asset stockpile revenue generating component around the stakeable assets. So it's sort of this giant virtuous loop. But our viewpoint is, as we try to get this amended into the NDAA, is that the Bitcoin Reserve components are unlikely to survive in an NDAA process. The primary reason being that you have Senator Elizabeth Warren and Jack Reed as the ranking member in Armed Services on the Senate side. The NDAA tends to be a very bipartisan process, tends to be a process where there is not nearly as much fanfare as we see around some of these other must-pass bills or mega bills. And so if you are hoping to see the NDAA continue to be the most must-pass bill, because it is the most successful must-pass bill in modern American political history, in the sense that it passes every year really without a whole lot of fanfare, then you're going to need to work on adding pieces of legislation to the NDAA that do not cause a lot of consternation by people on either side of the aisle. And as you can imagine, a Bitcoin reserve would cause quite a bit of frustration and pushback from lawmakers who really just aren't there yet on the need for a Bitcoin reserve. Now, I will say that a Bitcoin reserve is needed in the lens of a national security perspective. It should absolutely be something that we pursue as a country, knowing that we're going to need it as a monetary tool and for national defense. I just don't think lawmakers, at least the ones that are on armed services, are there yet. And of course, someone can offer it as a floor amendment during the NDAA process. No one is going to prevent you from doing that. But just in this current world that we're in right now with the NDAA, I see it hard to do that. So Mined in America strategy would be to pull those parts out, work on the parts that actually are core to Mined in America, to onshoring manufacturing in the United States. So that way we can bring down the committee threshold. Cross-jurisdiction issues are a major concern when you're working on legislation within the NDAA, and hopefully passing that into law. But we'll see. Fingers crossed that we can actually make this happen.
What are you hearing from the miners regarding quantum? Is that just a narrative that it's still very early, it's not really a big threat, and maybe short sellers were pushing that narrative with the recent bear market, of course? What are you hearing on that front?
So miners don't talk. They care about the quantum issue. There is conversations that take place, but I would say that it's not something that they spend a lot of their time on. But there are a number of different groups that this is a key priority. I think it's really important that we're having these conversations. I think it's just like when you're working on government policy, this is Bitcoin policy, but internal to Bitcoin. On like, what are we going to do? How are we going to move towards a world where Bitcoin is quantum resistant or is quantum proof with regards to its cryptography? The other big question is like, what are we doing with Satoshi's coins? Which is, people might be wondering like, what does Satoshi's coins have to do with quantum? Well, if you move to a post-quantum Bitcoin, much of the proposals that with regards to that approach require you to move your Bitcoin out of your pre-quantum wallet into a post-quantum wallet. Well, if Satoshi is not around, or doesn't exist, and he doesn't move them into the post-quantum wallet, or him or they or she, uh, those coins will be sitting there vulnerable, which means that whoever has a quantum
Mhm.
computer, and of course, I don't think the first person who gets a quantum computer, the first thing is not going to be go take Satoshi's coins, but inevitably there will be multiple groups that have access to this technology, and one day someone could just go grab them. They could just go take Satoshi's coins because they're in this pre-quantum vulnerable wallet. And those early wallets are some of the most vulnerable to quantum computing. So the question is, do we just leave these Bitcoin out here for some quantum hacker to take, which will not only mean that they've stolen Satoshi's coins, but now they have the potential to dump those coins onto the market, which could very much negatively impact the price of Bitcoin. I mean, you're talking about billions and billions and billions of dollars of Bitcoin that could just be slammed into the marketplace and crash the price of Bitcoin. So that's something that I think a lot of people are worried about or concerned about. Some people believe we need to if we'll set a clock, and if you don't move your coins from the old wallets into the new wallets, that your clock has run out, and we will now do something with those coins. And when people say do something with those coins, there are different proposals. One of the ones that I see floating around is like adding them into tail emissions for
Mhm.
Bitcoin mining. So a lot of people think that there's not enough of a subsidy for Bitcoin mining right now, that we need to juice that subsidy or find ways to do it. Most of those efforts have revolved around trying to increase the fees on Bitcoin. And some people have done that in ways that I personally agree with, and some people have done it in ways that I don't agree with or don't think is the right way to be using Bitcoin. As a quick example of that, it would be like, ordinals and those sorts of things. Like, not that I, despise or am disgusted by the ordinals as much as I just don't think that that is a long-term durable use case
Yeah.
for Bitcoin. When we're talking about using Bitcoin as a monetary tool, we're talking about using Bitcoin for national defense. And then all of a sudden you have this guy over here being like, maybe we should use it for ordinals. I'm like, it doesn't seem like a very big priority to me. Um, we need to prioritize how we think about Bitcoin. And also, in my opinion, I don't think you should whenever you're proposing a change to Bitcoin, I don't think we should be proposing changes to fit certain use cases. I don't think if your use case doesn't work on Bitcoin without having to change it, like I just don't think that's the right approach. And that's why I really like Jason Lowery's thesis and his approach to the technology, because in order to use Bitcoin in a way that can help with national defense, like we don't need to be radically changing Bitcoin to do that. So
Right.
it's a great fit. It's an incredibly important issue, high priority, and I believe that those use cases, and as well as others that are being explored, will drive up those costs. I don't know if this idea of moving Satoshi's coins into tail emissions is something that is going to be broadly adopted. I do think it will receive quite a bit of skepticism, because the moment you start moving around people's coins because of one excuse, you're much closer to moving them around for another excuse. It becomes a
Right.
very slippery slope. And I hate to be the slippery slope guy, but that is something that we need to be concerned about, is redistribution of the individual coins of individuals within the Bitcoin ecosystem. So we start off by saying, well, you got to do it because someone is going to take these coins, they're going to flood the market. And then the next thing time we're doing is like, well, we better do it. Otherwise the government's going to regulate us. And then it just becomes this sort of like reoccurring policy tool that we start using in Bitcoin, where whenever we have a problem, we're like, well, let's just change Bitcoin. Let's take people's coins. Let's just get rid of that problem. We don't want to deal with it anymore. And just the same way that boomers kept printing money over and over and over again because they got used to using that as a policy tool, and now we're at the end of the rope when it comes to printing money. The same could be true for these types of policy decisions. So I'm not saying I'm 100% against it, but
Mhm.
we should be exploring as many other policy solutions as possible within Bitcoin to solve the quantum problem, to solve the Satoshi wallet problem, without having to change Bitcoin drastically or without having to redistribute Satoshi's coins.
Is there a possibility, yeah, again, in the theme of what we're talking about with Mine in America as well as the Bitcoin Reserve, the US government can somehow take control of the Bitcoin in Satoshi's wallet? I don't know how they would do that, but that would fit perfectly where they put that into the reserve and it kind of solves that issue.
It's possible. I mean, the only big so we've certainly thought about this at Satoshi Action. There's other people that have tried to bring it up to us. Um, the only other issue there is, of course, jurisdictional. Like, why does the U.S. government get Satoshi's coins
Hmm.
uh, versus some other government? And it could just be, well, we're in an era of like might makes right, and so we're the most powerful country, so we're going to take it, and there's nothing you can do about it. Like, I mean, that's kind of the world we live in right now. Um, I don't think that's the optimal sort of way to think about these things, but if that's the result, like, I mean, I'm an American, I wouldn't complain too much, but I can imagine there would be quite a bit of folks around the world who would not like that approach and would resist that approach pretty strongly. there are some other ideas that we've been tossing around, it's sort of in the line of the way that you're thinking, but different than just like fully owning the crypto that or the Bitcoin that is within Satoshi's wallet. So I would certainly keep your eye out for hopefully if we are able to get this idea together and actually make it work. Hopefully we'll be able to do that within the coming months.
Hmm. I did want to get your thoughts on strategy and Michael Saylor. Recently, they mentioned that they are open to selling some of the Bitcoin they've
Mhm.
accumulated, even though they haven't done so. They've continued to buy. What are your thoughts on that? Is it kind of a nothing burger, or is this significant?
Yeah, I think it's a total nothing burger. I don't own MSTR. I'm not an investor. I've played around with some of the yield generating products that they have. Nothing of significant size. I don't see any problem with it. I think actually it actually makes me trust the product and the dynamic better, especially because when you're moved to this new world where you're doing the MSTR thing and MSTY, and now you have Stretch, that they're the product that they're selling, which is a 11.5%. They are using that money to buy Bitcoin. Bitcoin is 100% going to go up over more than 11% per year. So the basic premise is like you get stability of 11.5%, and we capture the upside. Well, because of that dynamic, occasionally they are going to have to sell some Bitcoin to be able to pay the dividends that they're producing. I mean, that is sort of like a
Right.
no brainer that this may occur. Now, I don't think they want to, or they're hoping to, but it's better to be honest, I think, with the investors
Sure.
now and early and say, hey, like this is just a tool that we may have to use, and we don't want you to freak out or think the market is collapsing because we sell a little bit of Bitcoin one day to be able to pay our dividend.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. I think I don't have a problem with them selling. I think a lot of people were just a bit turned off because Saylor has been preaching for so many years,
Sure.
right? And that's on
Never
him.
sell. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
I
that's
mean,
on
he's
him.
been like sell your kidney kind of guy. So,
Yeah, right.
I get it. I mean, I think it's people. Yeah, people just are going to be upset because of that the communication breakdown where you're saying never sell your kidney, sell your house, sell everything, just never sell the Bitcoin, and then they're like, well, we're going to sell the Bitcoin.
Right,
I think I get that. I get why people were upset from that perspective, but
right.
when the facts change on the ground with regards to how the company is set up, and it's definitely different now with this new product, then you need to reassess. And I think that they've done that, and they've put out their comments on it, and I'm glad that they did.
Yeah. Clarity Act. So, Dennis, it passed the markup phase in the Senate Banking Committee. We're still waiting for some timelines as far as when we're going to see the next major vote on the full Senate floor. What percentage chance are you giving this to pass by July 4th?
It changes every week, but I'm feeling very optimistic right now. But the big hurdle really, and I've been saying this for a long time now, which is that we need to have a fix for the ethics.
Hmm.
It's going to come down to the Trump admin. It's going to come down to Trump himself deciding, what is he willing to give up on the ethics side. And it's possible he gives nothing up and he just says, "I dare you not to vote for this bill," and moves towards the midterms, and now he's sort of turned the crypto industry against Democrats. Hopefully, that's what he's hoping would happen if in that sort of dynamic. The other option is he gives up enough of his own power with regards to how he can grow his own personal wealth through crypto that this is enough for Democrats to come on board and they end up passing the bill into law. So it's totally possible that Trump does nothing and somehow we still get enough Democrats to pass this bill into law because they're all scared of big crypto. Or the other, we could go the other way where Trump does offer enough and it's viewed as enough, something that Democrats can go take back to their jurisdictions and say, hey, look, we know you're pissed off about how much money Trump is making on crypto, but we got something done. We put guardrails on him. We were able to contain him. And that's really the last issue. The rewards issue has been relatively solved. The BRCA issues around Blockchain Regulatory Certainty Act have been more or less solved. There is an outstanding issue with regards to commissioners on the CFTC. There's no Democratic appointees on the CFTC right now, and that's pretty easy to solve. Just put people up there. But it's really like down to this ethics issue. And I do think that we could see a fuller vote pretty quickly if all things go well. Now, the only problem, of course, is that the House and the Senate just left. They just canceled votes. So they are out until June, and they're going to come back for after Memorial Day, and get back to work. But we're running out of calendar days. I mean, we have
Yeah.
I think 48 or something like that calendar days of session left. I know we've got a lot of, it feels like we got a lot of time left in the year, but there's not very many actual days when they'll be in the building, like working on legislation because you've got August. They're off for the whole month of August. and you go to September, October, and then you're getting into Christmas time, and there's breaks in between those periods as well, as far as when they're out of session. So we are really running out of time here, and I do think there will be a big push to bring it to the floor. Will that work? Will it be enough to get across the 60 vote threshold? That's very much TBD.
On the ethics issue, I'm surprised they're very some of the folks are hyper focused on crypto, but there's still the stock market issue, and not to mention other assets, right? So I feel like there needs to be a bigger ethics bill by itself that handles all assets. If you're a
Yeah.
politician, whether it be crypto, stocks, oil, whatever, you need to abide by these rules.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. I fully agree with you. I believe that there's a lot of cleanup that we can do in Washington D.C. with regards to money when it comes to personal finances of lawmakers, their ability to trade on stocks with insider information, I think is a very big concern. You have the crypto one. You have a number of these issues where including the campaign finance reform. Like we need campaign finance reform in this country worse than we need crypto
Yeah,
policy to pass into law. To be honest, I mean it's sort of out of control. We haven't really reined in on Congress with regards to money when it comes to campaigning or personal finances for quite a while in a way that's actually substantive. So I 100% agree with you. I think there needs to be something done there. The only problem is really like how do you convince the majority of Congress and the president to sign off on legislation that makes them poorer?
right.
So it's really what you need is of course the public to be outraged enough to encourage enough lawmakers to see that there is a political opportunity by being anti-corruption, by being anti enrichment, which we are seeing that take place. But will it be enough for maybe the next admin to come in and really do something on this subject? I mean, if you want to make big changes in Washington, D.C. around how people are getting paid, how much money they make, how campaign finance reform works, you're going to need a very big political mandate. You're going to need someone to come in and make this a major part of their campaign, run on it, win on it, and then go to DC and actually make change.
Yeah, and my hope is that, future generations are able to do this because I don't see it happening soon. But if people become more educated, and like you said, you have a solid candidate that, runs on this issue and people become more aware and like, wait a minute, what's happening here? And then they get riled up, that could be.
Yeah. I mean, I will say there has been growing momentum on the issue. I don't think it's like we're just going to keep kicking the can down the road. Oh, we care about this issue for now, and then it's gonna fade into the distance again. Like we have seen major movement on it. Even Nancy Pelosi has come out in support of a bill to ban insider stock trading in Congress. Senator Hawley on the Republican side has spent a lot of time on this issue. So we are seeing movement on it. We are seeing position movement on it, and that's really important. If you do want to get something done, you need to see position movement on it by folks in Congress, and a number of folks have done that. We're also seeing some new candidates enter the arena that really care about this issue. For instance, Tallarico out in Texas. Now, of course, he's a long shot to win, but a major part of his campaign is fighting back against corruption. And in general, anti-corruption is going to be a very big part, in my opinion, especially for Democrats right now,
Yeah.
especially as the public really views a lot of these deals that Trump is cutting, the trading that he is doing, the money that he is making. They view it very much as a corrupt act. And that is building up the political willpower within the Democratic Party to act on this issue. And people just need to remember that it's like DC is very hive mind. And so even though like several lawmakers might care about an issue and the public might care a lot about an issue, you sort of have to reach this like critical mass moment where there's a political opportunity to be able to move the needle. And there is very much a political opportunity here. Same political opportunity that was in front of Trump. When Trump saw how bad the Democrats were treating crypto, or at least the last admin was treating crypto, he saw that and was like, I don't even care. I don't even need to care about this stuff. Look at this political opportunity, all this money and all these people that'll support me if I just say I like crypto. So same thing with this sort of corruption component. There's a lot of concern from the public. It's a huge political opportunity. Someone does have the opportunity here when they run to potentially like slam the basketball down and score some points for their side. And love it or hate it, that is really a big part of how DC operates.
Absolutely. Final item here before I let you go. What's on your roadmap? Obviously, you guys are doing a lot of work, but anything you want to highlight?
Well, it was great to be on the show. Always appreciate you bringing me back on. Minded America is going to be a major focus for us. I think one of the things that people need to keep in mind is that Satoshi Action started off as a state policy group, and now we have branched into Washington, D.C. I moved here in November, so it has given me the opportunity to be in the trenches, building the relationships, building the trust that is necessary to be able to get policy across the finish line. We've done it 12 times at the state level, about to be 13 times at the state level, and we believe that we'll be able to repeat that success at the federal level. as we work through a variety of different policy issues. If people love the work that we're doing, they want to support us, they want to see us do more of this work, we would love for them to financially support the work that we do. We are a nonprofit, so all of our support, all the money that we bring into the organization comes from individuals who care deeply about the work that we're doing. The vast, vast, vast majority of our support comes from individuals, which is what we love. We love to be supported by individuals who want to see us get things done, versus taking all of the corporate money, right? I mean, and again, I'm not against corporate money necessarily in right size and scope, but because we are majority funded by individuals, we're really able to be focused on our mission and be very clear about what we want to deliver on. And our donors love that and they want to support that. So if folks do want to support us, go to satoshiaction.io, or you can find us on Twitter as well.
Dennis, always a pleasure. I'll put the link in the description to the site so folks go check that out. But Dennis, thanks for all the great work you're doing, man. I'm sure we're going to be talking again in a couple months because things are moving fast. And hopefully this is a year we get a lot of crypto bills through.
Yeah, I mean, I would tell people to stay positive, to stay motivated, because although not a lot has happened over the last 6 months, we are up against those deadlines, and so that is going to be really helpful for us in moving the ball. But yes, fingers crossed that we can get things done. This Congress is getting a little chaotic. The mood has changed here in Washington after Massey was taken out, Cassidy was taken out, and when we saw a number of legislative efforts that Trump put forward that caused some eyebrows to be raised. So, but I still feel hopeful that we can get things done and ultimately make progress for Bitcoin and digital asset policy here in the United States. And thank you again for having me on. I really appreciate coming on to talk to your folks today.
Awesome. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't as yet. If you're listening on a podcast platform such as Spotify or Apple, please follow and leave a 5-star rating. Thank you so much.